So much so that we're replicating a version of it in my town of Plainville, Massachusetts. And what really struck me is that I would call this a third place or a third space. Tell me why, like it's not school, it's not church, or it's not work, right? It's another place to gather. Why are those spaces so important today, especially, post-COVID?
So raise your hand if you've ever been to Dunedin. So here's a beautiful irony. I taught at Dunedin High School for 26 years, but the whole time I was living in Palm Harbor, I never been to Dunedin, but I understand the strong sense of history and culture that Dunedin has had. And so, for me, I want people to really appreciate that sense of why Dunedin is so special. There are people today who live in Plant City and other parts of the Tampa area, and they come to Dunedin every weekend because it has this sense of community that they don't have where they live. So when you reached out to me, I made sure I told you about Dunedin because I wanted to make sure if Jeff's going to come anywhere in the county, I wanted him to stay in Dunedin. And sure enough, you did. And then you and Julie stayed here for 2.5 days, and you walked around Dunedin and you got to experience it. So much so, can I tell them about the arch? So guys, last summer, we went to Massachusetts to visit Carol's brother, who lives in Massachusetts, but Jeff Kinney and his wife Julie have a bookstore in Plainville, population 9,000. Now, first of all, the name of the bookstore is something, it's my one and only question I wrote for you, but I don't want to, I'll ask it when you're ready.
Sure.
But guys, their bookstore is called An Unlikely Story. And it's a 3-story bookstore, but the 3rd floor is a studio. So when we were walking around, you gave us a tour of the studio, you showed us a board of pictures that are part of your vision for what's called Plainville Square. Because Jeff wants to create like a 3rd place where there's hiking trails. I think you just finished a beer garden. A beer garden, Jeff, beer garden, right? So he's imagining, how do you bring people together? How do you bring people together and experience something that I think a lot of Americans know is just missing? Community, the greater good, caring for each other. So what you showed me was when he was on Dunedin, he went to Pioneer Park. Raise your hand if you've been to the little park in the middle of Dunedin. And raise your hand if you know the stage. And there's this beautiful black structure. I don't know what it's called, but you took a picture of it. And Jeff showed me that last summer in Plainville, and he pointed out the picture of Brandt. We're going to have that made here in Plainville, the exact replica. So I think we share a commitment to understanding that if we can create spaces for people to come together as citizens to really engage, that's a big step in what we call participatory democracy.
Yes, and I'm pleased to see so many young people here today. Some of them can't vote. So they can't vote yet. So what can a young person do to get involved in our democracy?
Well, first of all, I think we older Americans have a responsibility to provide opportunities for you guys to come together, right? And I want to say something that's not critical of the school system per se, but guys, we in Florida have been living through 25 plus years of focus on standardized testing and measures that have really taken us away from the art and science of teaching, right? But what I say is that our commitment to participatory democracy is that we have to do a better job in school. While we're in school, we have to do a better job of helping kids learn how they can actually get involved. Because we have civics now, we have a 7th grade civics class, which is incredibly important. But the kids they're often not learning about how they can actually get involved because the climate here in Florida the last 5 years has been so unpleasant with accusations of teachers doing this, that, and the other, that a lot of teachers are just very wary of taking the steps that they know instinctively are what are needed to really help kids. Plus, there's all that pressure of staying on the pacing gun because you have to make sure they're going to do well in standardized tests. So we need to do a better job in school of helping kids learn the ways that they can actually get involved when they get out of school.
And I think we're about to take questions from the audience, but you said you had a question or two for me.
I had a question for you, Jeff, and the question was, your bookstore is called An Unlikely Story, and I love telling people the story because I always say, guess what the bookstore is called? And it's an unlikely story. I think it's incredible. So my question was, is there anything in your story, like your history, that would be unlikely? What's unlikely of you becoming this well-known author?
Yeah, I think it is an unlikely story. I'm not from there. I'm from Maryland, so that's unlikely that I came up there. And then I had this book series, and then it took off. And it's really strange for me. It's very surreal because, for example, I used to watch The Office. The Office in its first few seasons, and I really loved it. And then B.J. Novak, who was on The Office, showed up at our bookstore, and I drove him home. And Hillary Clinton was supposed to come. Chelsea Clinton's been we've done 4 events with Chelsea Clinton. Hillary Clinton was supposed to come to our bookstore, and I was like, that's just crazy, population of 9,000. And what happened was she booked it for March something 2020, right? So then COVID happened. She didn't end up coming. But that was the thing that spurred the rest of the downtown development, because we were thinking about how can we grow? Because if we can draw in authors that are nationally known, we need to be able to grow. So Hillary Clinton almost coming to Plainville, Massachusetts is what changed the center of town, which is another unlikely story. So our bookstore just abounds with unlikely stories. And if you're ever in Massachusetts, come visit.
Well, and I just want to say that from the moment I met you, you told me about Plainville Square, and I've been teaching sociology for many years, and I never knew where the third place was. And then when I learned about it as a sociology teacher, I had my kids do this really cool assignment where they had to design a model community here in Florida. So meeting you and knowing that you were working on something like Plainville Square, I think what that told me was, you were past the point of life where it was about, what history do you know, what beliefs do you have? You were actualizing it in the same way that I wanted to actualize it.
Yeah.
And now I'm at a point where I'm in a campaign where we are at the point where we are trying to make this country what it must become. And the excitement of actually being able to do that, guys, especially getting Americans to do a lot of things they've never done before. Because a lot of Americans don't have any experience sitting down and going to school and what would happen if our country had the majority of Americans doing that? So I love that meeting you, what we were already involved in with Plainville. That's just so moving to me. I'm so grateful.
You're an inspiration to a lot of people, Brandt, and I'm glad that some people here are getting to know you for the first time. So Sylvia, I think it's time for some questions from the audience. And we'll take them all.
Thank you guys, I appreciate it. Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you so much, y'all. And if you have a question in hand on an index card, if you could lift up that question and a volunteer will collect it from you to bring it up here. We are limited with microphones, which is why we're collecting them and bringing them up here. The first question we have for Brandt. While pushing for a community, how do you plan on beefing up public transportation in Pinellas?
So, I don't know if any of you are old enough to know that the state of Florida rejected federal funds. About 15 years ago, there were massive federal funds that would have provided for mass transit that would have connected Tampa area to Orlando and Miami, and the state of Florida turned those funds down. And now California took those funds. We're far behind on our commitment to mass transit. But I think what has to happen now, and this is really important, guys, because of AI, because of our understanding now, renewable energy, 30% of all the energy in this country is renewable. There are these major paradigm shifts that are needing to require us to come together and think about them when we apply them all to one thing. So for example, if we're going to talk about mass transit, we should talk about mass transit that has renewable energy in mind, mass transit that has environmental racism in mind, so we don't build mass transit tracks that are going to take advantage of disadvantaged neighborhoods. In other words, there are a lot more questions when it comes to mass transit than we might consider, but that's all the more reason why we have to try and bring people together to do that. We're really excited about being able to bring people together to solve some of these big problems.
You're welcome to comment too, Jeff.
Jeff, would you like to talk about mass transit?
I don't know anything about mass transit in Florida.
Are there
Sorry.
references to mass transit in the 21? Okay.
So speaking of Florida, Brandt, what are your thoughts on DeSantis' plan to change the homestead exemptions on property taxes?
Well, I think what we have to ask ourselves is, do we know what property taxes pay for? And if we know what property taxes pay for, we have to ask ourselves, are we ready to trust that those services will be paid for if the majority of citizens opt for this plan? Because I think for a lot of citizens, it looks really good on paper. They might save some money on their property insurance. But what happens if the same citizens are told they now have to start paying a fee for policing or fire? they're going to end up having to pay just as much in the end. And what's likely to happen is that some communities are going to be harmed more than others. We've been through this before. We had an 8-year period of legalized racial segregation discrimination called Jim Crow, where some parts of communities bore the brunt of environmental racism, chemical plants, whatever it is. My point is, if we're going to do this plan, this property tax plan, it's going to potentially be devastating for communities. And one last thing, guys. What makes Dunedin Dunedin? What makes Dunedin Dunedin is its commitment to providing the kind of services that come from property taxes that its citizens value. Dunedin cares a great deal about pride. This is Pride Month. Carol and I, 2 weeks ago, guys, there is a Pride golf cart parade, and we were in it, 100 golf carts all decked out in Pride. That takes money for the city to do. I wonder how many services cities like Dunedin would not be able to provide for their citizens if the property taxes were cut. And that might strike at the heart of what community needs at all. So I think that's where the confluence is. So the other.
Thank you, Brandt. When you win, when you win, not if. When you win, what will you do to overturn the anti-DEI laws? And what will you do to fight to get our road murals back in Pinellas? The road murals that they've painted over across Pinellas.
So I just wanted to throw an answer this question with you because 2 weeks ago, 2 of us were in St. Pete. And we were there because it was the 10th anniversary of the murder of 49 citizens in Orlando, right, at the Pulse nightclub. And we were there, but the reason we were in that spot in St. Pete is because it was the intersection of Central Avenue and 25th Street. And you guys raise your hand if you've ever driven down Central and you get to the place with a beautiful rainbow. But now it's painted black. We were there because we wanted to make sure people understood the implications and the consequences of the bigotry and the hatred. So my answer, Jeff, is, and my answer, Silvio, is that we can't waver and compromise when it comes to things like bigotry or cruelty or fear or xenophobia. In other words, I can sit down and talk with anyone, and I'm going to. We're going to canvass MPAs, we're going to canvass Republicans. But we can never waver on our commitment to the fundamental values and principles that this country is built on. And whether it's James Baldwin or me and Jeff Kinney, who just love human beings and believe we all have the rights and dignity of being a human being, we must never equivocate in our stand-up, or I should say, we should never equivocate in denouncing racial bigotry or any kind of discrimination. So my answer is, we will continue to be committed to programs that help students learn in environments, whether you call it DEI or whether you call it some program. We're never going to waver in the things that we do for our students each and every day. So we'll continue our priorities on DEI, whatever they're called.
Thank you, Brandt. Jeff, because I feel like you're being left out right now, we have questions for you too.
Nice. What color is book 22, right?
Oh my gosh, can you see the card? No, do you feel a responsibility to address evolving modern issues kids deal with, and how do you incorporate them into your books?
That's a great question. It's a sort of a deep question in a way. It's been a challenge for me because you were talking about making Dire Dormy Kids sort of modern or reflect our society. What's funny is that sometimes I'll do something that's a parody, and then it will turn out to be true. So I had a joke in my last book series where these books were getting banned, right? And the teachers had to, there were pictures of animals, like there was a character named Crocodile or something, and he didn't have pants, sort of like Donald Duck, right? So the teachers, the librarians had to spend all their time like coloring with a marker, coloring in pants on this, crocodile, which was meant to be funny because it's ridiculous. And I read a news story about that exact thing happening in schools, in places where books are being banned. So sometimes, it's like art reflects life, I guess, or art becomes life, or something like that. But it's really strange because I try to think of the most absurd thing and put it on paper, and then sometimes that absurd thing actually happens in real life.
That's
Quick question. Have any of your, I know your books haven't been made here in the United States, but have they been made anywhere else in the world?
Yeah, it's what's funny is that my books are banned in Tanzania, which is really quite strange. It happens to be the place where
Sorry, you said in Tanzania.
Tanzania.
What's the beef? What's up?
right, they for some reason they think my books are propagate LGBTQ themes, which they actually don't. It's just sort of a misunderstanding. But they're banned in Tanzania, which is funny because I go to Tanzania every year and I build, I fund wells for clean water projects and I build basketball courts. And so it's just funny that of all places on this earth that my books are banned, Tanzania.
No, wait, you're sitting with these kids in Tanzania. Are they like you have a little building back there where they have to read your books in like secret or something? Or?
No, but the parents have been told in Tanzania to check their kids' backpacks for my books. It's really it's a strange world that we live in.
Wow, I have no response to that. Brandt, how do you plan on supporting the preservation of public parks and forests once elected?
Well, you're in luck. My mom can identify 20 different kinds of animal poop. My mom is a naturalist. My mom, retired social worker, but she goes up to the Ocala National Forest sometimes by herself for hours and hikes and camps. And she passed that love on to me and my brother. And now, when I teach history, guys, raise your hand if you've heard people describe someone who's progressive as being radical. Like if you're progressive, are you radical? Okay, now do me a favor. Everybody, if you don't remember the history, just nod even if you don't. Guys, remember reading about and learning about the Progressive Era during America. Remember the Progressive Era? The Progressive Era was the period after the Gilded Age, where the gap between the rich and the poor was as great as it's ever been, right? Remember the robber barons and the wealthy and the millions of poor people and the working conditions. The Progressive Era is the period in which we finally decided that we're going to take care of the natural environment. And one of my most important heroes, Teddy Roosevelt, when he became president, he took a 4,000-mile train trip around the west of the United States. And when he got to Yellowstone National Park, he laid a cornerstone. And there's an arch there. And today, in Gardner, Montana, where the arch is, it says, for the benefit and enjoyment of the people. It was a speech that Roosevelt gave about why national parks embody our commitment to the greater good, and why just having national parks alone is a statement to our commitment to the greater good. And that goes for parks. The fight that we had here a few years ago, we should all be proud of. Honeymoon Island, remember a few years ago, the state decided to try and, put development in Honeymoon Island, and remember people stood up and said, no way? That's how I feel about public parks. We must provide those spaces because that's part of what makes our community.
Thank you, Brandt. We have a few questions about Citizens United, so I'm going to try to summarize a few of these. What are your plans to overturn the decision of Citizens United, or what laws do you plan on proposing to take to a place where there's fair taxation and fair politics?
So guys, get ready. I want everybody to say duh in just a second, guys. A lot of the changes we need to make can only be made if we retake control of Congress. But in the meantime, we must educate our citizens about that Supreme Court decision, because that was 16 years ago. And raise your hand if you're in your 20s. There's a lot of people that they don't even remember Citizens United. Guys, I hope you'll listen carefully as I say this, because when we talk to people on the campaign trail, we want them to understand the consequences of Citizens United. We ask them, how many teachers, how many plumbers, how many firefighters, like my friend Bernard Taylor, who's running for Congress in District 21 over in the East Coast. He's a firefighter, he's got massive biceps, he always makes videos from his gym. But how many firefighters or teachers thought about running for office over the years and then abandoned that thought because they knew they could never raise enough money? And take it a step farther. What would happen if today the majority of people in Congress were firefighters or teachers or plumbers and have been vetted by their communities? Wouldn't the laws be better? So if you understand the consequences, what we have to do is help people understand what has happened as a result of Citizens United, and the way we're framing it is corruption. Because if somebody gives our campaign money, we don't take PAC money, we don't take corporate money. Well, and then they also say we don't get paid to play because money can't buy votes. But I say that because for us, if someone were to contribute a large amount of money to my campaign, wouldn't they be expecting something in return? And I don't want the expectation of my actions as a member of Congress to be based on anything other than what I've heard from my constituents. And if they know that every month we hold a town hall meeting, and I know that most people won't be able to make it, but if we provide a text and a digital copy of what happened at every monthly town hall meeting, then maybe a year later, the same guy who might say, hey, I didn't vote for Brandt, but at least he's holding town hall meetings, and he's trying to make sure that I know what's happening. I think I like him. I want to keep him around for a while. So, for us, the challenge always starts with our ability to really explain to people about these things. And Citizens United is something we hear about on a regular basis. I don't think that many Americans really understand the implications of it. Citizens United was a Supreme Court decision in 2010 in which the court ruled that campaign contributions are a form of free speech. And just like we would fight and die to defend our right to free speech, now the court has said that giving money is a form of free speech, which means it's unlimited. And that has made it difficult for everyday people like us to really get involved in the system. And that's one of the reasons why we're so overjoyed where we are right now in the campaign, because we really are a true grassroots campaign. We're really right where we belong. But imagine if that was the norm. Imagine if our campaign was the norm for people running for office.
Can't wait. Okay, I hear you mentioning a specific initiative that you'd like to start, monthly town halls. We have a few questions about what specific bills you pass once elected. So let's narrow it down. You could list 2 to 3 bills that you'd like to propose to get passed as laws as soon as you're elected.
Well, we've already said Medicare for all. Right? We're very committed to Medicare for all, but we also know that we're first and foremost committed to making sure that we strengthen and expand the Affordable Care Act. Because the Affordable Care Act was a massive piece of legislation, just like Social Security. So that's our first step, right? We want to make sure that we're committed to that, because obviously the Big Bang Beautiful Bill is going to have implications for care as early as 2027. You're going to start to see services being rolled back. So first and foremost, a commitment. Universal child care, we really think we can speak to people about that. Because we all know people who are paying exorbitant $20,000 a year for child care. Everybody knows somebody in their life who can't do something because they can't afford child care, or they can't afford to do something else because they're paying too much for child care. But also, Sylvia, what's just happened to the Voting Rights Act. The Supreme Court has gutted the Voting Rights Act, and a lot of us don't realize that they have effectively said that we're back to the beginning of Jim Crow. Because now they're saying districts can draw any maps they want to, and what's happened over the last 2 months, 6 states have begun that process. And if you know what happened in Tennessee, quote, red state, but Memphis, a predominantly African-American city, where they have their one and only congressperson who's from Memphis, who's an African-American. Tennessee quickly redrew the map. Now Memphis is part of 3 different districts. There's the predominantly black section, but it goes out to the countryside, and those districts are predominantly white. So we would call Sylvia for the Voting Rights Act. We want to make it clear first and foremost that our elections are safe. They've always been safe. We want to make that clear, but we want to expand voting. We want to make voting easier, including a federal holiday for national elections. If you have a federal holiday,
I'm going to bring you both into this one. Light. What was your favorite book as a child, Mom?
My favorite book was Tales from a Fourth Grade Nothing by Judy Blume. What's funny is that I really profoundly didn't understand this until I became a bookstore owner, is that when I read books like by Judy Blume or Beverly Cleary, I could see it was like holding up a mirror to my own life, right? I could see myself in the pages. I saw myself as the protagonist. It wasn't a leap at all. And I've come to realize that so many kids don't get that opportunity. So many kids don't have their lives reflected back to them. And especially in Florida, where there's a lot of book banning going on, that's being, people are being told that they almost don't exist. They're being erased. So one of our priorities as bookstore owners is to put people on stage whose voices don't always get heard, so that every kid can see themselves in the pages of the book.
I told you, I watch PBS for fun, so it's probably not going to surprise you, but for me, the autobiography of Malcolm X.
As a kid, Brandt, as a kid.
Well, when
you may have been reading as a kid,
Mom, can you wait one more time? Because there's going to be people after we're done that want to come talk to you about how you raised me. Because when I was 11, I was reading books like the autobiography of Malcolm X. When you're 11, you think Malcolm X, violence, but what you don't realize is that when Malcolm X went to Mecca, and now I teach world history. Unit 2 guys, not with me. Unit 2, the development and spread of Islamic empires. I teach about how the religion of Islam. And just the other day, I attended an event in Tampa by the Arab American Coalition. A coalition because they have people that their families in the West Bank are being murdered by settlers, so they're having a coalition. They invited candidates to come. And I say that my commitment to all of our citizens includes our Muslim brothers and sisters. And so for me, what happened when Malcolm X went to Mecca is when he came back to America, he went to Mecca for the Hajj. And that's the pilgrimage that all Muslims want to take in their lifetime. And when he went to Mecca, he saw Muslims of all different colors and all different ethnicities and persuasions. And it made him rethink everything he thought he knew about his beliefs in civil rights in America. So when he came back, we know that he was already talking about possibly working with Dr. King, and he was talking about possibly using nonviolent political means. And so we'll never know because at the end of that year he was assassinated. But for me, it was about Malcolm X's potential for change.
Spoiler alert, we were reading very different books when we were 11 years old, right? Because my mom's also in the audience, and she can attest to that too. All right, I feel like both of you touched on this idea of what we share with youth, what we share with students learning. So I would love to hear from both of you. What can be done about all of the misinformation in schools and what they're teaching with regards to the quote-unquote history